Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So like the picture stated, we are going to do mass producing part 2, K.I.S.S method, keep it simple. I'm not going to go over all of the same things I did in the last one, but we are going to make about 20 cards today using this ornaments, stamp, die, stencil, and hot foil plate combination from Pinkfresh Studio. I showed you the stamp set. In a previous video, I used all of those sentiments to help quickly mass produce and get sentiments on a previous card. That was in the last video. So here I have my stamp positioning tool, and I have 6 total half sheets of A2 cardstock here. So these measure 8.5 by 5.5. And I have several combos of ink colors I'm going to go through. There's 6 in total, 1 for each piece of paper I have that I'm going to stamp an ink blend on. And what I did is I went to my Pinterest boards and found some inspiration for colors there. And then I went to my ink swatch book and I wrote those down, what matched the inspiration pieces. And I went through all of my inks and wrote them down so that I would know what inks to pull, and it would just make it go a lot faster for me. I also have my black amalgam ink from Gina K. This is waterproof, alcohol marker friendly proof. I wasn't sure exactly what things I was going to do, and just in case plans changed, I wanted to make sure that I had an ink that would be good for all of it. So here I'm using that to stamp this ink. This ink is not super dark like my VersaFine, which is what I prefer. And I am eventually toward the end going to go back and stamp all of this once it's ink blended with my VersaFine. But because I've never used this stamp before, I did go and just rub my fingers over it to get the manufacturing residue off. That's just how I do it. And then I have my little Stampin' Bug tool here that just helps take some pressure off my hand. As you can tell, because like I said, this is a brand new stamp. I haven't used it really before. It didn't stamp very great the first time. I do end up stamping these about 3 times. The further on I get in stamping them, excuse me, the less I have to stamp them. I think I only have to stamp them twice. And really, it was just because I wanted a darker image. You don't have to do that though. You could go ahead and use the VersaFine and heat set it. The VersaFine takes a little bit longer to dry, and that's why I didn't use it from the start, because I was in a rush. I was trying to get it in between the wee bear waking up, and so I was just trying to kind of speed things along. So here I have all 6 of my pages stamped, and now I'm going to do the stenciling. These are the 6 ink combos that I'm going to be using. There are 3 stencils in this set, and so I picked 3 colors. So the first one I'm going to use is Catherine Pooler Be Mine in Oh Boy, and Simon Says Stamp Saturated Ink in Iris. Then I have Stamp Market Cotton Candy, and then Gina K Powder Blue and Jelly Bean. Here is Concord and Ninth, Cranberry Evergreen and Midnight. This is Gina K's Red Hot Lemon Drop, and then Altenews Cloudy Sky. The next one is going to be all Simon Says Stamp. Oh, no, just lying. Sorry, lying to you. It's Catherine Pooler Fiesta Blue, Shea Butter, and Party Dress. And then we have all Simon Says Stamp saturated inks in Cherry, Perfection, and Seafoam. Now, something to be aware of. This stencil set, some of the inks are going to overlap. And so as I was going along and stenciling, I discovered that some of my inks were not making the prettiest of colors. And so going back, I wish I would have, if I wasn't in, a time crunch to kind of mass produce these and bust them out a lot faster, I wish that I would have used a smaller ink blending brush to be a little more selective on where I placed my inks. That would have prevented me from getting kind of muddy colors or desaturated colors, I guess you could say. And so looking back, I wish I would have done that a little different. However, they still turned out fine. I think they're still going to be beautiful, and I think whoever gets them will still appreciate them, and they're not going to sit there and say, "Oh, she should have used a smaller ink blending brush. This looks like mud." They're not going to do that. Let's be real. So this first this first stencil has a lot of open area, and this is where I say that a lot of the subsequent stencils will overlap colors. This is where I'm getting at with that. So here I have a little shelf liner that I've just cut down into a rectangle, and that helps keep my ink pads from sliding around all over my table. Simon Says Stamp has the Positively Everything tool, their pet tool, that's in the shape of a paw, and that tool accomplishes the same purpose. This is like pennies, whereas that's like $8. So we're gonna roll with this. Maybe eventually I'll get that, but the crafty budget is being spent other places at this time. So here I'm just taking my ink blending brushes that are designated for dye inks and just lightly ink blending this. This is where I am very grateful to have this glass media board from Glassboard Studio. All of these magnets are holding my stencil in place, so I don't even have to use my other hand. I can ink blend all of this with one hand. I don't have to sit there and hold the stencil or use a whole bunch of tape to hold everything down, although you very well could. That's how I did it for a long time, and sometimes when I'm not even thinking, I'd still do that. But this glass board sure does make it a lot more convenient to not have to use that other hand and a whole bunch of tape. I just shift the magnets around when they start to get in my way. I'm just going to peel the stencil up just to kind of get an idea if I like the color and the saturation level that I have. And if I'm pleased with it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the next stencil on top of the current stencil that I'm using. This just helps me not have to fiddle so much with lining the next one up. If you just lay it on top of the current one that you're using and then just slide it out, slide that first one out, and then this one is pretty much in the exact spot that you need it. You may have to do a slight bit of maneuvering, but not a whole bunch. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. He's restless, I guess. I don't know. But that's what the scratching noise in the background is. Sorry. So here, this is the Catherine Puller Oh Boy. And I'm going to start ink blending this next color. I'm just using my flour sack cloth that I use for all of the things to kind of wipe off any of the previous color that may have been on my ink blending brush. Now, this is a good place to talk about how there are open parts that overlap with previous open parts of the stencil. So you're going to get a mixing of colors here. This little one in the bottom left, that little stencil section is not connected at both ends. It's only connected at the top, and I found that out real fast. So when you're ink blending that one, just go from top to bottom on it. Otherwise, you're going to move that little piece and you may even bend it and break it. So that's something to be aware of with that one. Just go straight up and down with that. Now, back to this blending that you might get. So if we look at the rainbow and the color wheel, so red, yellow, and blue are your primary colors. You mix those together to get your other colors. Now, here I have a red, blue, and a purple. These are going to play very nicely together because they are red and blue mixed to make purple. Purple will mix well next with the pink because it's next to pink in the color wheel, and it will mix well with the blue because again it's next to the blue in the color wheel. So all of these will play nicely together. Do a lot of the other colors I choose play nicely together? Not so much. I wish I could say the opposite, but I can't. So this is the final stencil. Like I said, there's only 3 stencils in this set. And you could, if you wanted to be a little more careful, if you wanted to spend a little more time, You could have used a smaller ink blending brush and been more selective on where you placed your inks, so that you didn't necessarily have to worry about creating mud when you were ink blending. This is the first time I've used the stencil set, and I was not aware of that when I was picking out my colors. And so we get what we get. Lessons learned for next time. So I'm going to go ahead and move these magnets out of the way and show you the results. Ta-da! Like I said, these blend really well together because they're either going to make pretty colors, or they're going to sit right next to each other on the color wheel, so they play nicely together. So that was the Be Mine, Oh Boy from Catherine Pooler, and then the Simon Says Stamp Saturated Ink Iris. If you see the ink blending off to the side, don't worry about that. We are going to use the coordinating die to cut all of these out. I'm going to briefly show you how I clean my stencils. I just have my stamp cleaning solution and that same flour sackcloth that looks really rough. It might need a bath soon. I just spray that on there and wipe the front and the back of the stencil, and it's all clean. So, voila. So here, this is one that had to be a little different because I lacked a third ornament. And so I turned it on its side, and I'm trying to get this lined up, and I'm really struggling. Um, just because the top font is scripty and it has some downstrokes that are just making it difficult for me to kind of see. And then this other one is long and skinny and it bends. I'm having a devil of a time. So what I'm going to end up getting is I have a grid transparency that I purchased from Simon Says Stamp forever and a day ago. And I just keep it at the back of my Misty, my mini Misty here. And I'm going to use that to help me line up these sentiments. It's clear and it's got a grid on it, you know, like the name says. And I'm just going to use this to help me line up these sentiments. And I can already tell that like the secondary greeting is crooked. And I'm going to end up fiddling this with for an exorbitant amount of time trying to get this to line up right. But all that grid transparency does is keep you from wasting cardstock because you can end up wiping it off. So y'all, I fiddled with this for like 3 minutes trying to get this straight. Eventually get it straight. I've removed the grid transparency. I've tucked it back into the back of my mini Misty. I'm using my little mini Stampin' Bug to help me get even pressure and take some strain off my wrist. Didn't stamp very good the first time. I just think that was user error. I just don't think I pressed very hard in that one spot. It does look a little wavy. Not wavy enough that it makes me have like some kind of nervous tick. But if you look at it long enough, you can definitely see that that little section of it is wavy. And I think I just kind of, because this is a photopolymer stamp, I think I just kind of bent it when I was placing it down, but it's not terrible. We're going to roll with it. I've used that same mini Misty to now work on the panels that are 4 1/4 by, or excuse me, that are 4 by 5 1/4, and that are going to be portrait, not landscape. So like I said, I kind of adapted some things as they were needed. And so I just placed those at the bottom. I did the same thing with the grid transparency, used that to help me line things up and get things straight. And I'm just stamping these toward the bottom of these panels. The reason why I did this is because they are 1/4 of an inch difference from the card bases to the card front panels. And that's enough that I felt that it was wiser to stamp these separately as opposed to keep everything the same and stamp everything all at once. I felt that this would give me better proportions and better alignment. Again, you don't have to do that though, if you didn't want to. So these are the ones that are directly on the card base. And again, I've pulled out that grid transparency. It's going to help me get things straight, but it is the same process as before. Now, some of these, like the dark purple and the red, I didn't feel like black would show up very well. It probably would have on the red, but I didn't feel like it'd show up very good on the purple. In fact, I knew it wouldn't show up on the purple. So I ended up switching to a pigment ink for that, and that one is from Hero Art. Here that is right here. It's called Unicorn White Pigment Ink. I cleaned off my stamp really, really good because this is white and it will show all of the things. And so I cleaned it off really good and I'm stamping it with the Unicorn White. Now, heaven help me. My stamp was a little wet from when I cleaned it. I think some of the stamp cleaner seeped underneath. And so when I was stamping it down or putting my ink on my stamp, it kind of wiggled the tail end of that sentiment. And so it tilts down. It's kind of got a little cockeyed, and that's okay. We're not going to stress. We're not going to stress. So I just straightened it out, and we're going to stamp the other 2 card bases. I felt like the white showed up well enough. I have a gold, and you can maybe see that just the bottom end of that stamp pad. That is gold delicata. I think it's called Glitz. Golden Glitz? Un momento. Yeah, Golden Glitz. Look at me go. From Delicata. And I thought I might have to use that on the purple, possibly even the red. I didn't. I felt like the white showed up well enough. This one I stamped twice. I would have stamped the first one twice, but I ended up moving the stamp a little bit before I stamped it. So if I would have stamped it again after I moved it, I would have gotten some like weird haloing, and I didn't want to mess with that. So I was able to stamp the rest of these twice. And I felt like that showed up well enough, and I didn't even bother with the golden one. Here I'm just going to go and figure out where I want to place these ornaments. I'm trying to place the biggest one or the longest one in the middle, and I'm trying to somewhat center it over the word the. And then the other two, just trying to place them as best I can to where they look proportional and somewhat evenly dispersed around the card. And then I'm going to take my reptile glue that I have in this Bearly Arts glue bottle, fine tip glue bottle, and I'm going to glue each of these down. I have a little acrylic block here that I'm using to apply pressure so that these get good adherence and don't fall off as they're being mailed and written on and handled by the recipient. Now, to give these ornaments the feel of an ornament and not like they're just hanging out in space, I have a Paper Studio fine liner pen in the 0.5 nib size, and I'm taking my Westcott T-square ruler and I am lining this up, and I'm just going to draw a line. I'm going to do this to every single card, every single ornament. I'm just drawing a line from either the card front panel or to the very end of the card, and I'm doing this on every single, and going from that point to the ornament topper. And I'm going to freehand some little bowstrings and like a little bow loops, that's the word I'm looking for, bow loops. I thought that looked really weird, and I was like, what is it missing? And I was like, oh, the bow loops, duh. And so I will go through on every single one of these cards and add bowstrings, bow loops, using this T-square ruler and this particular marker. I'm sorry you can't see that. That is a Sakura Jelly Roll pen in 0.8. It's a white one. And I'm going to go through and do the same thing with this. A line from the ornament topper to the end of the card. Just one thin line. And we are going to finish up these purple and red ones. Now we are just going to, all of the cards are done. Now we're just going to run through and show you a little bit of each and every one of them. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some tips and tricks on how to mass produce cards. This took me from start to finish about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And again, this is 20 cards. That does not include me pulling all of my inks and kind of getting my inspiration from Pinterest, but really you could keep this very simple and do them all the same 3 colors. Just pick 3 of your favorites, put them all on white card bases or all on a colored card base that you like, and you can make this so much faster. I just get bored, and so I like to switch up the colors, and I like to find different colored inspiration. But you could keep this even simpler and just use 3 of the same. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some inspiration, and we will catch you on the next video. Bye.